287-0971 or Rev-Up. Office numbers are 572-0383 and 572-0215. Rev-Up St. Lucia, the alpha of radio.
Join the United Workers' Party this and every Thursday on Rev-Up St. Lucia 97.1 FM for an educational and informative program, Meet the Opposition. Participate in exciting discussions from 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Be in the know every Thursday on Rev-Up St. Lucia 97.1 from 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
It's now time for another Meet the Opposition, hosted by Leonard Spider Montut. Mr. Montut, a very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Andre, and good morning to all of our listeners and, should I say, viewers, those listening to us on radio, those on live stream. Very pleasant good morning to you and welcome to Meet the Opposition. I'm hoping that those of you who are here in St. Lucia and those of you who traveled from the diaspora to St. Lucia for the St. Lucia Jazz Festival, that you are indeed having a good time and that you have a very entertaining and safe jazz festival. And of course, the weekend is the high point of it. Mm-hmm. So there's much to look forward to, and I'm hoping that, St. Lucians of all walks of life, those who are not actually enjoying, at least benefiting in one way or another. But having said so, there's something I would love to say, and that is, please, if the politicians could just get out of our face a little bit, let it be a national festival without the politicization. I mean, those ministers of government who are all over the place in people's faces and making it look like it was partisan affair and so on. There are some things that are national in nature, let it be. You do not have to try to make political mileage out of everything. I find it a little distasteful the way that the politicians are out there. You can come and enjoy yourself like everyone else and have a good time like everyone else, but stop making it look like it's an SLP affair. That's actually distasteful. I understand that an election is imminent, but, find other ways to appeal to voters and to state your claim for office. Having said so, today I want to deal with talking about politicization. I want to deal with a couple of subjects that are of national concern. And this morning I'm not particularly interested in whether you are UWP or SLP. Let's talk about what is in the interest of our country, St. Lucia, and what is happening here in our country, St. Lucia. And of course, that will bring me to the subject of what is happening with the CIP. Those of you who do not already know, I'm sure when you hear what I will detail to you, you'll be alarmed at what is happening there, because I think it is just totally out of control and totally unacceptable, but we will get into that a little later. Well, you hear from politicians, especially the politicians of the current administration, how much they're concerned about you, how much they care about you, how much they're interested in you, so much so that the phrase is that they are putting you first. But it is one thing to say something, but it's another thing whether you actually practice it. And if you look at human relations, men, for example, in normal life pursue women, and to gain favor with the women, men make all sorts of promises, some of them outlandish, some of them promises that is never intended to be kept, just to achieve their goal of getting to the woman and so on. But while you can never be sure, and there must be an element of trust. And of course, once you trust, you're liable to get hurt. And so, but at the same time, you have to constantly make assessments, you have to constantly evaluate, and you have to constantly take stock to find out whether you're being taken for a ride, whether the person talking to you is genuine, and whether you can place your trust in that person. And the way to do so is by not just listening to what the person is saying to you, but by observing the person's actions. And when a person begins to show you through their actions that they are not trustworthy, then it becomes time to put up your guard and to be cautious when dealing with that person. That applies also to voters when dealing with politicians. And I say so because I hear, all the the punchlines, the catchphrases, all the terms that politicians use to attract voters and the things that they say and promise to attract voters. But ask yourself whether they are in fact delivering on those promises. And don't fool yourself, and do not allow them to fool you. Because at the end of the day, you cannot tell me what I'm seeing, you cannot tell me what I'm feeling, you cannot tell me what I'm experiencing. I do that for myself. And that is where we're going to base our discussion this morning, not on what we hear from politicians, but what we see, what we experience, on what the actual reality is. Because it is not what I say, it is what I do. That is the actual testimony of my character, my nature, and my intention. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I ask the question, has the government of St. Lucia put us first? First, let us look at one of the actions from very early in the day. I recall when I was in government between 2016 and 2021, there was a situation where at one point there were high fuel prices on the world market. And the government at the time under Alan Chasney took a decision, realizing the far-reaching consequences of allowing the price of fuel to go out of control, decided that, yes, government seeks to generate revenue from the sale of fuel here in St. Lucia by imposing different taxes on the fuel, but that after things had become, so out of control and cost of living we felt was high enough, a decision was made by the Alan Chasney administration to put a cap on the price of fuel. And when I say they put a cap on the price of fuel, it means that regardless what, the government will not allow the price of fuel to go past that amount. And so when the price eventually went down, because it fluctuates, sometimes it is very high, sometimes it is lower, the price of fuel was hovering somewhere around $75 a barrel. The government decided that they would cap the price of fuel at $13.95. So when you go to the pump at the gas station, you would pay $13.95 for 1 gallon of fuel. And that meant that if the price had gone down to $70, for example, the government might have kept it at 13, and so they would be recouping some of the losses they would have made if it had gone up to, say, $80 or even to $100 a barrel, and so on. But at the end of the day, it was a risk on the part of the government where they could have ended up realizing a loss, but they decided to take that decision from an economic standpoint to stabilize the price of fuel so that you could have a more predictable outcome and impact on the economy. Then came the SLP administration in 2021. Granted, we came out of COVID because even in 2021, we were still in the throes of the COVID-19 pandemic. And with the COVID pandemic, what happened as we came out of COVID and commerce began to take place once again, and the world economy kickstart once more, what we saw was exorbitant prices, on the international market for goods and services. That meant that we experienced inflation, that the cost of living had gone up, especially given the fact that we in St. Lucia import almost everything that we need under the sun. What a government does at a time like this, because of course, especially when you're an import-based economy, you do not have very much control over the price of items, because if you buy an item for so much, you are obligated to sell it for so much to ensure that you do not make a loss. But a good government that really and truly does not only say that they care about the people, but that they genuinely concern and cares about the people, would take measures, would put policies in place to minimize the impact of that inflation, to try to control the high cost of goods on the shelf and the goods of services in the country. Let us look at what actually happened. In the face of all that inflation, in the face of the high cost of living that we were facing after the SLP government came into office, what they did? In 2023, they slapped on us a 2.5% levy on goods and services. Now, that itself is a whole story because it was done deceitfully. And that's another thing again. When you entrust someone to take care of your affairs, and in the case of a country, you entrust people as your leaders to act on your behalf, to transact on behalf of the country and so on, there is an element of trust. And those people's word must mean something. And when people are beginning to be secretive, number one, dishonest, number two, and deceitful, trust goes out of the window. If there is still a St. Lucian who has trust in our current government, that is because you are a blind follower. You do not analyze and evaluate things sensibly for yourself. And that is because you are warped in your analysis of reality. Because day after day, time after time, there are government officials blatantly telling lies to the population of St. Lucia. Outright lies, verifiable lies. And it has been done by the majority, I can say, of the government officials sitting in cabinet. The main culprit, unfortunately, is the Prime Minister. He has misled St. Lucians time and again, over and over again. And so the government told us that that 2.5% levy was going to be imposed for the purpose of improving our health and security, to finance the improvement of health and security in this country. Now, as I always say, no one likes to pay taxes. No one welcomes additional taxes. I'm no exception. But there comes a time when you have to look at things realistically, irrespective of your political bias, leaning, or or affiliation. And you have to say to yourself, look, healthcare is in fact expensive. We do have a security problem in this country. And if a government is asking that we make a sacrifice to pay more on top of the already high cost of living to improve those areas, then perhaps that is a sacrifice worth making. Only to find out that that was an outright lie on the part of Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre. The true reason why they imposed that 2.5% levy on St. Lucians was because they were trying to procure a loan from the Caribbean Development Bank, and they needed to show that they can generate additional revenue, and that is the reason. I recall at a meeting with the Chamber of Commerce, it was actually disclosed that that money would just go to the general pool in the treasury of St. Lucia and utilized for just about anything and everything under the sun that government has to do. Evidence of the fact that that money was never earmarked or specifically designated for security and health was the fact that we have experienced before that, since that, and during that time, the worst conditions of our healthcare system that we have ever experienced. And I'm quoting the St. Lucia Medical and Dental Association right now by saying so. We also experience record numbers of homicides in this country during the time under consideration. So in other words, the same Prime Minister who told us that on top of all the burdens that we had to bear with the high cost of living, he imposed a levy on us for goods and services, and to make matters worse, a compounded tax it was, because that was very often multiplied as you go down the chain before it gets to the consumer. So very often the consumer ended up paying much more than 2.5%, further exacerbating our suffering as far as high cost of living is concerned. We found out that money was not for the purpose indicated, and as a matter of fact, in the two areas identified, the two areas pinpointed by the Prime Minister, we experienced the worst that we have ever seen in the history of this country in those two areas. The SLMDA told us that our healthcare system was the worst that it has been, and we saw for ourselves with record numbers of homicide each year. Last year being 77, the highest that we have ever experienced. That is what we paid for. A worsening security and safety situation, and the worst ever healthcare system St. Lucia have experienced. Now, can you trust people who would do to you something like that? And don't take it lightly, because they affected your quality of life, they affected your freedom, they affected, your well-being, and we just took it. Now, the price of fuel I started with, when they assumed office, was $13.95 at the pump. So a government who claims that they're concerned about people, that they're putting people first, guess what they did? They increased the price of fuel on the people of St. Lucia. Instead of leaving it capped at the amount that it was, they increased the price. At one point, St. Lucians, you will remember, we were paying $17.95 for a gallon of fuel at the pumps, an increase of $4 per gallon. Yes, unconscionable, you might add. $4 more for a gallon of gas at the pumps imposed upon us by this government. Since then, we have seen a dramatic decrease in the price of fuel, or the price of oil on the international market. And even when the price of oil was $70 a barrel, and remember we capped it when it was about $75 at $13.95, even when it was $70 less than when we demitted office, they kept the price exorbitantly high. They gave us some reprieve. They pretended that they gave us some reprieve, but they brought the price to $16.50 for a gallon. The opposition has protested that. The opposition has raised the alarm and indicated that is gouging that is taking place on the price, on the part of the government of St. Lucia against the people of St. Lucia. And that it was unconscionable to be taxing the people of St. Lucia to that extent. Given the high cost of living, given the pressure we were under already with inflation, you would have thought a government who really cares about us would welcome the opportunity that the price of oil on the international market had gone down, and that they would pass on that lowering in price to the consumer, to we the people of St. Lucia. And despite all the hue and cry by the opposition, they kept the price at $16.50. But of course, the Prime Minister himself in opposition used to say, 5 years is not 50 years, or something to that effect. Well, it's still the same. 5 years is not 50 years. And guess what? 5 years is approaching. The day of reckoning is near. And now you see the concern. Now you see the caring. Now you see the interest. But even then, it is tokenized. It is tokenized because you have a government, and I will establish to you that this current government has extorted money from the people of St. Lucia in various forms, various means, not just through the price of gas. And so today, well, in the budget, the Prime Minister came with his list of goodies. Of course, this is an election budget. Any fool knows that. And so all of a sudden, they have become magnanimous. They have become, benefactors. They're philanthropic. They're generous. They're concerned. They care. They're interested. And so they give you a whole list of goodies. One, a proposal made by the opposition, St. Lucia Labour Party at the last convention, not St. Lucia Labour Party, the United Workers' Party at the last convention, that they would increase the time frame of the validity of your passport from 5 years to 10 years at the same price. They run ahead, because that's a low-hanging fruit, they run ahead and they implement it. And big song and dance about it, the Prime Minister is touting that as an achievement. Well, it's no achievement, because in the first place, you are the one, the St. Lucia Labour Party government, are the ones who reduced the time frame from 10 years to 5 years. So if you all return it to what it was, you all have not given St. Lucians anything. Okay? If you have returned it to what it was, you have returned to them what they already had. The next thing is, we are reducing the price of gas at the pumps. And okay, so finally they're going to bring the price of gas to below $14. They remove 50 cents. And they said that the price of a gallon of gas at the pump is now $16. The highest in the OECS in terms of the price of gas and diesel is here in St. Lucia. We pay the most here in St. Lucia. There are countries where it is 13 something, countries where it's 12 something. St. Lucia is $16 for a gallon of gas at the pump, $16 for a gallon of diesel at the pump. And guess what? Today, my information is that a barrel of oil has plummeted to $58 a barrel. You know, why can't we enjoy that reprieve from a government who says that they care about us? This is a government who boasts every year in their budget how they surpass their revenue projection and make a lot more money, millions and millions of dollars more than they projected, because of the fact that they have their hand deep in your pocket. Because that additional revenue comes from the 2.5 compounded tax that they have imposed on you. That additional money comes from the high cost of fuel, even though the price of oil is low on the international market. That comes from all the taxes that they impose and they do not give you a reprieve from. You know, that comes from the cutbacks on subsidies, that used to exist before that they have cut back on. So in other words, they have taken from you to bolster the revenue of government. A true, real, innovative government does the opposite. You allow as much money as possible to remain in the hands of your citizens, because all of us know, experience has taught us, that the individual is a better manager of his finances than government will ever be. We all know too that when there is money in circulation, there is more commerce, okay? The economy becomes bolstered and government in turn generates more revenue. We all know that. But an unimaginative government that is not creative, that does not understand economies, what they do is they tax people through their noses and their ears, and in so doing make the lives of the individuals in that country worse, so you become worse off, and things do not become better, nor do they improve in the country. Because you saw that health has not improved, security has not improved, our road infrastructure has not improved, nothing has improved, despite the exorbitant extortion that is taking place through the route of taxing you St. Lucians. And so, that in itself is testimony to the fact that it is all talk and there's no genuine concern or interest in you as a people. Because if a government cared about you, they didn't have to find any invention. The world economy, the international situation permits and presented the opportunity for that. Just as the world situation caused inflation, now there's things that are happening that are causing some reprieve but it is not being passed on to you by your government. And I'm talking about the price of oil on the international market, which today stands at $58, but you're still paying $16 a gallon at the pump. Unconscionable. Absolute extortion on the part of your government against you, the people of St. Lucia. Now, I spoke of the levy, I spoke of the price of gas, I touched a little on the passport. You know, some of the things that they're touting as achievements, like the passport and so on, they talk about the back pay that they gave to public servants and make it sound like it is a great achievement and something to boast about. And they always add the political line, you know, the back pay that the government, the previous administration did not honor. Well, there was an agreement, so. And you know, that is being honest with people. When you are honest with people, you tell them the truth and you do not try to gain mileage by being deceitful. And that is exactly what the Prime Minister and his government has done. And so to suggest that the government did not pay the people the back pay or did not want to pay the people the back pay, and you come as the hero, the knight in shining armor, and you know, doing the people a favor by paying them the back pay, absolute nonsense. What had happened is the Alan Chasney administration, for the first time, engaged in negotiations with the trade unions and negotiated ahead of time. So normally, when I say that, what I mean is normally they negotiate every 3 years. So they call that a triennium. So the triennium that it would end in 2025 would now be negotiated. So you're looking at a period that has passed. What they did, they looked at the triennium to come. So they negotiated the current triennium and the one to come. And so they had already negotiated up to 2022. And what happened, what transpired is they had agreed upon salary increases for that period. But what no one had anticipated, what no one expected, what no one knew was coming, was a pandemic called COVID-19 that turned everything upside down, you know, put all economies on its head and decimated economies worldwide. So, at the time, the government of St. Lucia wasn't generating no more than about $60 million a month. You know, barely enough to pay salaries. And remember that the government did not lay off or terminate the services of any public servants. And remember, the government did not decrease the salaries of the public servants, even though at that time many public servants stayed home and could not come to work because of the curfew and what have you. They continued to be paid their full salary. And so, at that time, the government was in no position to honor the salary increase. And so here's what the government said to the public servants, who themselves knew the situation better than I did, because they are the ones running the country. We are not in a position to pay the salary increase right now, and that's what Alan Chasney administration negotiated. But we intend to honor the payment so that just give us an opportunity to come out of this pandemic, and as soon as we begin to turn the economy around, in December of 2022, you will be paid the first salary increase that is due to you, and by March of 2023, the balance would be paid to you. You know, that's the back pay the Prime Minister is talking about, you know. That was agreed upon by the government and the workers' representatives, the trade unions. In fact, if Philip J. Pierre really cared about the public servants, if he really had the public servants' interests at heart, given the fact that after he had done all the tax gouging and all the extortion through gas and everything, with all the additional revenue he was boasting that they had collected more than what was projected, he would have paid the public servants in December 2022 and in March 2023, as promised, as was agreed. He did not. And there was no excuse why he could not. Because, as I said, they were generating revenue from the extortion that was taking place beyond what was projected. He did not pay the public servants. He waited until the year of election. So politics comes before your interests. He waited until the year of election to make the payment and to make it look like he was doing you a favor. Philip J. and the SLP government has done the public servants no favors. And it is no achievement, no accomplishment. It is money due to the workers, owed to the workers, that you paid to them that was overdue because you delayed their payment. So that, my friend, stop touting it as if it is some big accomplishment. Now, I want to look into another matter. A matter that was hardly mentioned in the last budget of St. Lucia. A matter that has been brought to the fore mainly by the opposition, the CIP, the Citizen by Investment Program of St. Lucia. We know that that is a program that is shrouded in all kinds of controversy. That is a program that has attracted a bad reputation across the region, especially in St. Kitts, Dominica, and St. Lucia. This is a program that has attracted the interests of the international community, namely the United States, the United Kingdom, and the European Union. Those international communities are concerned because of their relations with St. Lucia. And let me remind you, St. Lucia, we enjoy very good relations with those people, with those communities, to the extent that our passport has high value when it comes to our relations with those people. And I say so because though we need a visa to travel to the US, we are among countries where I can safely say, as a St. Lucian, it is not the most difficult thing to get a US visa. And maybe I might be exaggerating a little, but I think it is safe to say almost every other St. Lucian has a US visa. When it comes to England, we had visa-free access. When it came to the Schengen states, that is the countries in Europe, France and Spain and all those countries, we had no difficulties getting a Schengen visa. I want to explain to you, St. Lucian, that the value of our CIP program rests heavily on that fact. Why would a Saudi, why would someone from Dubai, why would someone from Nigeria be interested in having a St. Lucian passport? They come from countries where the economy is far bigger, far better, far more affluent than ours. If you notice, many of them are not even interested in coming to live here. Why do they want our passport? Because our passport gives them access to those international communities. And so, I've always said, if I had my way, my advice would be to not engage in the sale of our citizenship, in the sale of our passport. But I also understand, given the background that I come from, and given what I have seen around me, there are circumstances sometimes that warrants that you do things that you may consider to be less than ideal. And I have likened the situation in the past to a mother with 4 children. Fathers no longer with the mother, they're not taking care of the children. Now, that mother goes and sleeps with a man for money. So for the man to assist her with the children, he demands sexual favors. Now, that is not an ideal situation. That is not the most moral position to be in. But do I condemn that mother outright? No, I don't. We have to take a lot of things into consideration before we exact condemnation. Because the first question I ask you, would you leave your children hungry? And you may ask me if that's the only thing the mother can do. In many cases, mothers have very little options because they must probably sometimes got pregnant very early, had to drop out of school, have no profession, have nothing going for them, and so on. So, while that is not an ideal situation, you can at least understand what has placed that mother in a position to do it. And so I'm going back to the CIP program. We have seawater, we have sun, we have sand. Almost everywhere in the world you can find that. We have a hospitable people and so on, but that is not enough to keep us afloat in this hostile, unforgiving, aggressive, international world situation. For us to survive, we have to find ingenious ways of making do and generating revenue. We beg, but generosity is a scarcity nowadays. Countries do not come forward just giving aid and that kind of thing like it used to happen before. So we resorted to this program. And like I said, not the most ideal, but we resorted to it. And it was a program, or it is a program with the potential of generating quite a lot of revenue for the country of St. Lucia. That is provided that it is handled properly.
And just for argument's sake, just curious, who started this program? Your administration or the Labour Party?
The Labour Party started it.
Okay.
But I have to admit, our administration came into office and continued it. So, again, I'm not condemning them outright for starting it, and I'm not condemning the UWP for continuing it. Circumstances. Like I said, given if I had my way, and we found oil in the Caribbean Sea across there from St. Lucia near Pigeon Point or something, so Andrea, I'll tell you, let's get out of that. Or suddenly they found gold, and it would be even better if it's in my backyard, Andrea. They found gold. You know, but we do not have the resources for us to call shots as such, so we do what we have to do.
But you made a very good point earlier. I never looked at it like that. You were saying that the people who are interested in purchasing our passports, they have some sort of ulterior motive as to why they would want to do that. You even made a good point again. You said that they don't necessarily even want to be
in
St. Lucia.
Right.
So obviously there's something.
Right.
Yeah.
However, the catch in that, Andre, is there are some unsavory characters out there who, for reasons of maybe money laundering, terrorism, and those things, are banned or will not be welcomed in some of those countries. And they may not be on the radar because they may not have been caught in anything illegal. But if you present certain passports, you come under greater scrutiny. And let's be real. If I give you a job as a security in some U.S. airport and so on, I mean, you're looking for terrorists, you're not exactly looking at St. Lucians. I'm not saying it's impossible, but the likelihood is minimal. And so those are concerns of the international community when we now are selling our passports to those people, and those people can sneak in under the guise of being St. Lucian citizens.
I want to ask you something else.
Yeah.
Did I break your train of thought?
No. I will always come back to what I say.
Why is it that we cannot sell our own passports? Why is it that we seem to be?
That's another discussion we have to come to. I must admit, Andre, that you and I do not have the network or the international connections and so on to readily sell passports as some of the agents out there can. But that is a question I've asked. Say, for example, and I'm just arbitrarily calling names. I'm not suggesting I have any idea that these people are interested in anything like that. But you have some big companies in St. Lucia, and mind you, Renault is into, or Fresh Start and so on, is into construction, they're into heavy equipment. These people are into what makes money. So if you were to say to them, boy, we're giving you a quota of 1,000 passports, if you can sell it at 100,000 US and so on, you will get so much, like what we are offering the foreigners. They probably would have to engage agents over there, go out there themselves and do it and like that. But that would be a great thing. And I'll tell you why I say it's a great thing. Because all that money would come back to St. Lucia, and say what you want. Renault and Fresh Start and Nationwide and so on will not give me the money, but invariably, Andre, you and I will benefit in one way or another. Because if they have money, they invest, they create jobs, people do commerce, somehow it will cross my business somehow, some way. So I'm just saying it is in all our benefit when that happens. But Andre, going back to the CIP program, we have seen from recent revelations that that is a program that can generate billions of dollars for St. Lucia. This is a program that is also prone to corruption if you do not have people with integrity managing that program.
So when you talk about corruption, you're talking about the home country?
The home country, in the sense that
or the people who are applying.
Can be bribed by the agents and by the applicants. Like there's the high potential for bribery. There's high potential for collusion in facilitating money laundering and things of that sort. Okay.
So give us an example of how somebody in St. Lucia can be bribed through the program. Give us an example.
Simple. I am not saying that is the case, but you will not be, Andrew, at the end of what I'm saying, will not be surprised if you was bribed. You give a company called Galaxy, which is a Chinese company, they make an application, you allocate 6,000 shares or files.
And by the way, when you say you, who are you referring to?
The government.
Okay.
You as the Minister of CIP allocate 6,000 through, of course, the unit, right? 6,000 shares or files. Now I want to explain that shares or files. When they say 6,000 shares or file, a share or file can be up to 4 people. Andre Paul, his wife, his 2 children, up to 4 people, for an amount of money, let's say $250,000. But it can also be just one person for $250,000. So you have a minimum of 6,000 times 250,000. Okay. Now, what is the deal there? That is the program called the real estate program, where the agent comes and he says, I am willing to invest in St. Lucia. I want to build a hotel in St. Lucia, so let's negotiate. So how much will that hotel cost? In the case of Galaxy, and it's good that you asked me that question, I'm dealing with an actual situation. In the case of a Galaxy, the hotel will cost about $400 million US. So you now negotiating on my behalf, Andre, you're the Minister of CIP, negotiating on my behalf with my passport. You're going to say to Galaxy.
And by the way, when you say negotiate, who am I negotiating with?
With Galaxy, the company.
Okay.
You're going to say to Galaxy, well, in that case, if you're going to build an hotel in St. Lucia, I will give you passports. So when you sell those passports, you can make up to the tune of, let's say, $400 million. So in other words, you can, not for free, because you have some risk there. Because if you do not sell the passport, you still have to build a hotel for $400 million. But chances are, especially given the fact that our passport is in demand, you will make the $400 million. It means, Andre, you're getting an hotel built that belongs to you from the sale of our passports. But the government went beyond that. They gave them 6,000 that can raise up to $1.5 billion. So, if the hotel costs something like, say, 400, 500 million, half a billion, and you give 1.5, what happens? That's what I'm curious about. What happens to the $1 billion extra? And why did you give them the $1 billion extra, Andre? Why? There's no answer to that question, Andre. That question has been asked by the opposition. The leader of the opposition has been asking that question, ad nauseum, and there has been no answer. Do you know why there has been no answer? How are you going to answer that? I put you in the place of the minister. How are you going to answer that?
I don't think I'm that skilled.
you know.
But so you're saying that this is where the possible corruption
exactly
may come in.
And Andre, I strongly believe that there is corruption, especially since you not answering my question. Because you will tell me, Andre, I'm unlike you're always devil's advocate. Well, there could be another reason. Well, okay, give it to me. Give it to me. Tell me the good reason. You understand what I'm saying? That is what has happened to us in St. Lucia. And St. Lucians don't even realize that. Now, let me just say something to you.
Don't you think it's possible the minister may be playing games, meaning the fact that the opposition is asking, he's deliberately holding the information?
No. is deliberately holding the information because there's something to hide. Okay? And I'll always say to you, when there's secrecy, it means there's something to hide. It means you cannot trust the person who is secretive. Andre, you can be secretive about your business, not about the matters of state that you offered yourself for service to represent us about. This is my business. When I ask about the passport, Andre, I'm not asking about your passport. I'm asking about St. Lucian passport, which is our passport. Okay? And they always talk about the patrimony. That's our patrimony. Okay? You owe it to us. You know? And that is where St. Lucians have to take a stand and to demand. Now, Andre, let me do something that I did on another program right here now. We have enough time to do so. I do not want to continue the speculation. I want to give St. Lucians the actual situation. Those of you who've heard it before, bear with me. There are those who have not. I'm going to read a letter that the St. Lucia CIP unit wrote to Galaxy, and the response that Galaxy wrote to them in return. Now, background. We have a situation where the opposition was saying that, boy, there's a lot of irregularities in this thing. We need to know how many files were given. And let me just say, before I go further, that when we were in office, because the government will quickly tell you, well, you all are the ones who brought in Galaxy. So they were the ones who brought in DSH. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with DSH because they were the ones who brought in DSH. There's nothing wrong with us bringing in Galaxy if when they were investigated, when the due diligence was done, we found nothing to, militate against us bringing them in. But having brought them in, the St. Lucia government under Alan Chasney negotiated with them for that same hotel, which was about $400 million. And Alan Chasney, who was the minister of CIP, offered them 750 passports. I say passports, they call it file shares and so on. Because in effect, at the end of this passport, you sell them, whether you want to disguise it or not. Offered them 750. That would have amounted to about 60% of the value of the hotel, Andre. At the time, people like me say, wow, 60% and the hotel belonged to them. I grumble about it. You understand what I'm saying? But boy, the people are not in business because they like St. Lucia. They're in business to make money, to make a profit. So you must offer them something attractive for them to buy it. And so Alan felt they must have some skin in the game, so they would have to put in 40%. Mind you, it's their hotel at the end. Government change. The SLP under Philip J. Pierre and with Ernest Hiller as minister found that was not good enough. They offered them an additional 5,000 passports. Now, why? Who authorized that deal? Why did you make that deal? But let's not go into that. All of that is speculation.
Just
so
before you go into the letter.
Yeah, before I go into the letter.
I just have a couple of questions. When we allow a foreign entity to sell our passports, do you know the process? How do they actually sell the passports? And along the way, the CIP office, are they aware of what's going on, who the passports are being sold to and so on?
They should be.
Is there any monitoring?
Well, that's how it's done. I mean, I don't know all the fine details, but generally speaking, what happens is that the agent goes out there on the international market. Agent
for Galaxy, for example?
Yes. And says, well, they have St. Lucian passports on sale for $100,000 US dollars or $250,000 US dollars.
Is that something that's advertised? Or
it is, yes.
Oh, okay.
And so when you come forward and you say you wish to purchase, you pay that amount. But before that happens, they indicate to St. Lucia, Andre Paul is interested in buying what they call due diligence has to be done. Who is Andre Paul? If he's a criminal, you don't want that person to have your passport.
So who does the due diligence? The agent? The agent out there selling the passports?
The agent is supposed to do the due diligence, but there are also other international agencies that are contracted to do the due diligence on the part of the government of St. Lucia.
So those...
On behalf of the government.
Oh, okay. All right.
And so when you're satisfied that Andre, okay, is clean, there's nothing, untoward and so on, St. Lucia will approve. Monies are exchanged and the transaction goes forward. What Alan Chasney and the United Workers' Party, Dominic Fede, Guy Joseph and the likes have been saying is that, look, for transparency, for accountability, that money should be placed in an escrow account. And let me quickly explain what an escrow account is. You and I are doing business, Andre. In business is not based on trust. Business is based on transparency and on certain basic principles. We open a special account. Now you might, in our case, you might say that Bank of St. Lucia control that account. So whenever money is made, we deposit it to that account. And you have access to the account, I have access to the account. So when you say, I have sold 10 passports and the money has been received, I can go and check that it is so. And I would have to know if money is being removed from that account and all that kind of thing. That in itself creates a situation of accountability and transparency. That does not happen. The money goes to Galaxy's account. You heard me? The money goes to Galaxy's account. And Ernest Hilaire, no less, has said publicly that the money is Galaxy's money, not our money. So, that is one of the things Alan Chasney and the United Workers' Party has challenged. The next thing is we are asking.
And that's a challenge in court, right? That's what you mean?
He has ended up in court. But even before that, we are asking, what is happening with the CIP? Andre, the SLP, I told you, started CIP, and they are the ones who drew up the CIP Act. That is the laws governing the CIP. And one of the stipulations, Andre, is that the CIP unit is supposed to present to the minister, I think sometime around April every year, a report on all the workings of the CIP. And the minister is supposed to table in Parliament, present the Parliament by October each year, a full report on the workings of the CIP.
And that full report is supposed to include what happened to the other...
How many passports were sold and all of those things.
Right.
Andre, do you know that it took the minister over a year to present, over a year, let me put it correctly, over a year after the report was due to present the first report, after much agitation by the opposition. Do you know, Andre, after that and on top of that, the report for last year was due in October. The next report was due in October last year. What are we now? May of the following year. And that report has not been presented. Again, I ask the question, why? You know?
So all these questions, can't the opposition go directly to the CIP office and get the answers? Is it that the CIP office is completely...
In all fairness to the leader of the opposition, he has written, he has gone in Parliament, make a song and dance about it. They have outrightly rejected, ignored him rather. The leader of the opposition...
You mean the CIP office?
And the Parliament, the minister rather, not the Parliament, the minister, who is a member of Parliament, has ignored him. What he has resorted to now, to insist that the answer be presented, and that is on behalf of the people of St. Lucia, because the people of St. Lucia have a right to know. And if you may not be interested, Andre, but I am, and I have a right to know. And whether or not you're interested, you have a right to know. If you choose today, you should be able to go to the website of the CIP unit and access the information. And if just because of that discussion we're having there right now, you should be able to go and say, no, Galaxy did not get 6,000 shares or passports. They only got so and so. You should be able to access that information. That's supposed to be public knowledge. The minister once said to a media worker that he is not at liberty to divulge that information. He would have to first get permission from Galaxy as to whether or not he can. Can you imagine that? You know, but
so is he incorrect in saying that?
He is incorrect in saying that. That's public knowledge. That's supposed to be presented to a Parliament, and Parliament is public knowledge, you know, where the opposition is supposed to be able to get it and to scrutinize it, where I is supposed to have access to go to their website and see it and so on. The media Andre, I always say, speaks on my behalf. I don't have access to you. The media comes and asks you a question. And like I always say, you're asking people questions many times that you all know the answer to. It's because you know that I want to know. You understand? So, but just to prove to you and to answer your question, that is that possible? He went to Dubai. And in that forum, he divulged the same information that he said in St. Lucia that he could not disclose. Okay?
And what information is that?
How many passports were allocated?
So this is where you found out how many were sold?
Well, in my case, no. That's where many people found out. I found out because the contract was leaked. And that's how we found out. Okay?
So why was that such a secret thing? Well, that's why I go back to what I said earlier, that maybe the minister is doing this deliberately because the opposition is the one asking.
There are a lot of maybes.
Or maybe he thinks that you already know the answer.
There are a lot of maybes, Andre. There are a lot of maybes. But let's find out eventually what the real maybe could be. You know, Andre, the leader of the opposition took his money because there's no provision under our system for him to get access to national funds to do something like that, and took the matter to court to force more transparency, more accountability. When I say more accountability, because one of the things he has challenged is the fact that there's no escrow account. That is to protect our money, you know, and the sale of our passports. And two, for us to be provided with the information as to what exactly was happening. Because in the absence of information, the Prime Minister said to us, go and speculate. Now, you can only speculate. If you're speculating in the dark, you can be as wrong as, you know, as from what is far away from the grocery. But information that we have a right to know. Now, if the leader of the opposition loses the case, he loses his money. Whether he wins the case, he gains nothing, you know.
So this case that the Prime Minister has filed with the courts, is this going to force the CIP to give the information that the opposition is requesting, or the minister?
First of all, the court has entertained it, which means there is merit. And when the leader of the opposition asks a question, they can tell him, go to hell. But when the court asks you, you have to present it.
Ask whom? The minister?
Minister and the CIP unit. They have to present the information. That is the difference. Now, when that happens, we gain. The leader of the opposition has nothing to gain. Well, you might want to argue, maybe, from my point of view, he will gain political points, from my point of view. He would have gained my respect, and I would have seen that he has done the country a good turn, and that I will give him political credit for. But in terms of dollars and cents, he has nothing to gain. Nothing. Okay? But he did that. Remember, in the interim, US is grumbling, EU is grumbling, UK is grumbling, and threatening to take certain actions. They have taken certain actions against certain countries. Because right now, a Dominican needs a visa to go to England. Okay? And the EU and the US have demanded that we do certain things if we want to maintain our travel privileges to their countries. Okay? So, they had no choice. So the OECS now came together and decided, okay, they drew up a memorandum of understanding, an MOA, of agreement rather, memorandum of agreement, an MOA, that they are going to improve and tighten up on the program, which should have been in the first case, you know, like have an escrow account, you know, have a minimum fee, because that's another charge that the leader of the opposition was making, that they were underselling the passport in terms of price. And they agreed that they would do all of those things to appease the international community. St. Lucia requested that they be given time, that some grandfather clause, that since they only the last to start off, others made their money and so on, so give them a break so they can make their money, and then they will implement it. You understand it?
So is the CIP office a force unto themselves? I mean, isn't the CIP office accountable to the people of St. Lucia? Why?
They're accountable to the people through Onesile, who is not accountable to the people. And he's supposed to be a
so in other words,
elected, but he has proven that he's not.
So in other words, the fact that the CIP unit is not giving the answers, basically they're not in a position to do that.
Who?
The CIP office.
They can provide the information, but you would want to say like they would probably want to get, because they operate under a minister with the consent of the minister.
So they must get permission
Consent from the
the minister before they.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, I got you.
But the minister himself is obligated, after they present the report, he's supposed to present the report to the public, meaning he's supposed to put it in Parliament. So, Andre, with the memorandum of understanding that St. Lucia was reluctant to implement, Alan Chastney took them to court. All of a sudden, they jump up and they say, okay, they're going to put the escrow account in place. Yeah, these are the things they're taking to court for, They're going to put the escrow account in place. They're going to increase the price to what it is supposed to be, because the price was supposed to be $250,000. They gave it to them at $100,000 US dollars. So they're going to put it at the right price and all of those changes. So two things here. One, they're going to fall in line with the memorandum of agreement. Two, they're going to appease the international community. And three, in effect, the claims that Alan Chastney is making in the courts, they would make it null and void. Because, okay, by the time you get to court, well, we have done that already. You understand what I'm saying? Now, I don't know how...
You're saying had the opposition leader not taken that action, they would not have been,
Absolutely.
made those changes.
Absolutely. So, in effect, I don't know how these things work. Whether the court will still look at the situation and say, well, at the time the case was filed against you, you're guilty of those, whatever the case is. But then the fact that it has been remedied, I do not know how it will be handled, how it will be dealt with. But that is a victory for the people of St. Lucia in itself, because it has forced them to divulge certain information, and it has forced them to make certain amendments to the arrangements that is taking place. And it has caused us to be more enlightened and informed.
So when this thing finally gets, a judgment is supposed to be passed or made on this matter, and the judge looks at the evidence, and those changes have been made, wouldn't the judge just then throw this out then? Because
I don't know if the fact that you stole my money yesterday means that you didn't commit a crime if I get my money back next week. I don't know. It's a matter for the judge to decide. Or
is there still an outstanding matter there in terms of the additional monies which were collected? Right. That matter is still outstanding.
I'm sure
albeit they made those changes.
Andre, I'm asking you, and you in turn were asking me. I'm sure the court will be interested in knowing, well, why you give them all those passports when all they're going to invest is so much. But let's stop all the speculation now, Andre. Let me go into the letter so you can hear for yourself what exactly the situation is. I've done it before, I'm going to do it again because it's an important matter, a national issue that cannot be overemphasized, that cannot be overstated. Here is a letter from the St. Lucia Citizenship by Investment, CBI, in St. Lucia we call it CIP, okay, that was written to Mrs. Ying Jing, the Director of Caribbean Galaxy Real Estate Limited, Rodney Base, Grocery, St. Lucia. The letter reads...
And who penned the letter?
The letter was signed by Mr. Julian Charles, the Deputy Chairman of the CIP. Now, don't ask me about the chairman, Andre. It is a long time now we have been asking the question whether there is a chairman and who is the chairman. That question has not been answered. That is your transparent government.
There's a deputy, right?
There's a deputy. But you know you're going to ask me why it's not the chairman that signed.
Exactly.
That's what I want to ask you too. You know? And so that is your transparent government who is there to serve you, who put in you first. That's how they treat you. The letter reads, "Thank you for meeting with the Board of Directors and Management on the 2nd of July 2024 to discuss the way forward with our current enterprise agreement. As you are aware, there has been a legislative increase which took effect from 1st of July 2024. In the case of the enterprise option," now these are the different programs. They have enterprise option and they have real estate option and those things, okay? In the case of the enterprise option, that is the real estate, what we call the real estate option, the price of the qualifying investment has increased from $100,000 for a single applicant to a fixed fee of $250,000 for a family of 4.
Mm-hmm.
The Citizenship by Investment Board, the CIB, is mindful that this change will cause adjustments to our existing agreement. We are aware that you have commenced sales of this option and are fully committed to processing these applications under the previous price. As agreed, and in the interest of time, we look forward to following to the following on or before the 8th of July 2024. The first point is the total number of applications submitted as at June 30th, 2024. The second one is Caribbean Galaxy's position on the proposal in our meeting, whereby we suggested that clients pay the qualifying investment and associated administration fees directly to the CIU. So the change now, instead of paying directly to Galaxy, but they want them to pay directly to the CIU. That is the fees, what fee? The qualifying investment and associated administration fees, and that's what they're talking about there. Caribbean Galaxy's position on a reduction in the number of shares under the adjusted price or an increase in the capital investment in the agreement. Now, remember the agreement, the investment is $100 million. That's what Galaxy will invest, and they gave them those passports to sell, right? 6,000 passports. So they're saying now that the price has gone from 100,000 US to 250,000 US, it means you're going to be making much more money.
Mm.
So they're saying that they would reduce the number of shares since you're making more money. So in other words, if you're looking to make $600,000, they give you 6,000 passport out of 100,000, you make $600 million. So now that is 250,000. My maths is not that sharp, but you'd have to get a lot less than 6,000 passports. So let's say 2,000 something passports to give you the 600. That's what they're saying. Or if you don't agree to that, since you're making so much more money, you will increase the investment. So instead of spending 100 million to do the project, whatever project, you will spend more than that. Mm-hmm. That's the proposal from our CIP unit. The response to the above are critical to our discussion as we proceed for a mutually beneficial amendment to the existing agreement. Signed, Julian Charles, Deputy Chairman, Citizen by Investment Board. Andre, I want to go into our response now. No, sorry, that was our letter. I say our because they're acting on our behalf. I want to go to Galaxy's response. When I'm finished reading Galaxy's response, tell me who's in charge of this country and who runs the show in this country.
By the way, were those letters leaked?
Those letters are out here as a result of the court case.
Explain.
Well, the court has to... Okay, Alan Chasney took the matter to court. Mm. If there are any developments and so on, I think in court they call it disclosure or whatever. Mm. They have to provide those information.
Okay.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So, dear, that's Mr. Julian Charles, Deputy Chairman. Dear Mr. Charles, 1. We write in response to your letter dated 2nd July 2024 in respect of the enterprise agreement between us and the government of St. Lucia dated 12 January 2024 and signed on behalf of the government of St. Lucia by Honorable Dr. Ernest Hilaire. 2. Your letter refers to the proposed increase in relevant qualifying enterprise investments, option 3, from $100,000 for a single applicant to a fixed fee of $250,000 for a family of 4. This increase is, as we understand it, part of the arrangements agreed between the government of St. Lucia and other Caribbean countries, as OACS countries that are in the CIP, other Caribbean countries pursuant to a memorandum of agreement concluded earlier this year. That's the MOA that I was talking about. Number 4, of course, that MOA is a multilateral agreement between states and is not part of the laws of St. Lucia, nor is Galaxy a party to it. We understood from your prior letter of 30th June 2024 that amendments to the legislation regarding CIP, regarding citizenship by investment, I'm looking for page 2 now. There it is, was due to be issued on July 1st, 2024. As yet, we have not been provided with a copy of any revised CBI legislation, whether as enacted or proposed, and we are unaware of what transactional regime it proposes, if any. We would be grateful if you could provide us with a copy of the relevant amending legislation. Number 5, as we understand it, however, applications currently submitted will be processed under the existing regime that is subject to the minimum charges set out in the agreement, and the minimum charge was $100,000 for a passport. Number 6, your second July 2024 letter seeks to amend the agreement by reference to the changes which have been or will be brought about by the MOA. By A, increasing the minimum qualifying investment, that is from $100,000 to $250,000, and B, either reducing the number of shares to be provided to us pursuant to the agreement, that is 6,000 shares, 6,000 passports, or increasing the current capital investment $100 million. Like that, like I said, that's what they're proposing. That either one, they're going to increase the amount from 100,000 to 250,000 for the applicants, and 2, that in light of that, they'll be reducing the amount of shares from 6,000 or increasing the current capital investment of $100 million. And that makes sense. But here, Galaxy's response to that. Number 7, you will appreciate that the counterparty to the agreement, the government of St. Lucia, has no ability unilaterally to alter the terms of the agreement, which were contractually agreed. Indeed, the agreement specifically envisaged the possibility of an increase in the minimum qualifying investment and set out an agreed formula to recompense us in such an event. So, Galaxy is saying to them, go to hell with that proposal. We anticipated and envisaged the possibility of that change, and we took the precaution of ensuring that there was a formula that would recompense us in such an event. Let us go further to find out what would that be. Pursuant to clause 2 and 3A of the agreement, Galaxy agreed to provide funding of $100 million with an additional $2 million by way of management costs for the purposes of the project as defined in the agreement. This is the contractually agreed investment sum. So Galaxy would be spending $100 million, plus they will be giving us $2 million for administrative fees. Okay? That is what they agreed to. B, pursuant to clause 3C of the agreement, the government of St. Lucia agreed to provide 6,000 shares by way of remuneration for Galaxy's contribution of $100 million. So Galaxy will be spending $100 million, and we will have to tell them how we want them, whether it's a hospital or a road or whatever. They will be spending $100 million, and in exchange, we're giving them 6,000 shares. So they go and they sell those passports, the 6,000, to make their money back. No, but not just their money, and a lot more. Mm-hmm. You know? Now, number 8 is what hit me between the eye, and I want to see your reaction on that. Importantly, the payment of monies following the sale of these shares was not to be held in escrow. Instead, it was to be held for Galaxy's account. In other words, remember I told you about that special account. It's not to be held in no escrow account. It's in their account. The quid pro quo, I mean, we have to come back to that word. The quid pro quo was that Galaxy's payment of monies for the purposes of the project was not dependent upon sales of shares, and they asked you to see clause 3B. So, what was the quid pro quo dependent upon? We're going to come back to that because you see that term quid pro quo in an official contract raises eyebrows. Number 9, Galaxy before the commercial risk is bore the commercial risk in that regard. That is, it may have been able to sell less than the full 6,000 shares, but would still remain committed to funding the project to the value of $100 million. Conversely, if Galaxy were able to sell the shares for more than the minimum charges stipulated in Clause 3G on page 5 of the agreement, those additional monies would be for the account of Galaxy. Fellas dictating the terms there right now. Number 10, the government of St. Lucia also contractually agreed that it would not increase the minimum charges for the sale of the shares until Galaxy had sold all 6,000 shares. See Clause 3K on page 15 of the agreement. Thus, what is proposed is in breach of the agreement. I will stop here for now, Andre, because I think the gist of what the whole transaction has been borne out by what I have just read there. That in itself is a big revelation that says a lot about what has happened, what has transpired with our CIP program, and the powers that our government has granted to Galaxy in dealing with that situation. And for today, that Galaxy can speak to our government the way that they are and dictating the terms of the agreement as far as it is concerned. Now, I want to go back to quid pro quo in number 8. Importantly, the payment of monies following the sales of these shares was not to be held in escrow. Instead, it was to be held for Galaxy's account. The quid pro quo was that Galaxy's payment of monies for the purposes of the project was not dependent upon sale of the shares. So what was the quid pro quo dependent on? What is quid pro quo, first of all? Quid pro quo, on the surface, doesn't suggest anything bad, but I'm Googling it here right now, Andre, and I will read the different definitions, and so that we can come up with the various permutations as far as that is concerned, and to cause alarm to us that it is being used in that official document here. Okay? Quid pro quo is a favor or advantage granted or expected in return for something. That is what quid pro quo is. So, Andre, you're doing what you're doing for me, not out of benevolence, but you're doing it for something. Now, if that something is above board, and there's nothing wrong with that, but very often when we talk about quid pro quo, Andre, it's under the table business. So, in other words, you giving me something for something is not necessarily wrong. But when that term is used, it tends to suggest that there's something fishy. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, someone in my last show said to me, quid pro quo, I forget what the term that they use, you know. But in other words, on the block, Andre, we say buck and buck. Okay? You know, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. That kind of thing. That's what it is, quid pro quo. But is a quid pro quo illegal? A quid pro quo is only illegal if it breaks the law. As in the case of a bribe, blackmail, or some sort of contingency, for example, requesting something non-work related in return for not firing an employee, for example. Even if an instance of a quid pro quo is deemed legal, it may still be viewed unfavorably. So I'm saying to you, I'm very curious about that word showing up in that thing there. So, was there a bribe? Quid pro quo normally, the use of the word quid pro quo normally suggests that. And I am asking the question, how could and why would Dr. Ernest Hille allow and enter into an agreement with a foreign company to give them, now Andre, mind you can do the calculation, $250,000 multiplied by 6,000 will give you about 1.5 billion US dollars. 1.5 billion US dollars is roughly about 4.5 billion EC dollars. In return, we're getting 100 million US dollars. Or in other words, let's say 450 million EC dollars. So there's a whole a whole billion US. Explain that to me, somebody. Why would Dr. Ernest Hille enter into such an agreement on our behalf? And who authorized him or permitted him to do so? So I'm saying to you, now I'm going to go back to the letter to read another line that is of interest to me. I'm saying to you that the Prime Minister, who is the leader of this country, and who is in fact the Minister of Finance, must have known about this. Must. To date. And he knows, if I know and you know now about this, he knows too. To date, we have not heard a word from him. That is a gross, and I'll put it mildly, anomaly. All right? Andre, the correct term for this is gross corruption. The Prime Minister has not said a word. And if Ernest Hille acted unilaterally in entering such an agreement on our behalf, he should by now be fired. And if he is not fired, the rest of the government, including the Prime Minister, is in collusion. Now, Andre, the EU has taken a position that they put pressure on us and demanded that we do certain things. The UK has taken a position. The US has taken a position. I ask the question again. What is the position you are taking, St. Lucians? We have to take a position on that as well. Because we are the ones being exploited here. We are the ones being taken for a ride here. And it is our resources here that is being swindled. Okay? That cannot just go like this. And when you talk about ball in government, and you have people that have plywood, and you hear that whether it's true or not, none of it has been proven. And even if it is true, Andre, that is child's play. A sheet of plywood is $100. That's child's play. We're talking about billion US. And Andre, our budget for this year was 2 billion EC. We're talking about here on this document alone, that's transaction. And there are other things. There's a real estate thing that they entered to with Galaxy, you know. That's just the enterprise program. We're talking about 4.5 billion EC dollars. Andre, you can clear your budget for this year twice and have 50 million US dollars left. Andre, you didn't have to borrow 1 cent to finance twice your budget. You talk about, how do you call it, sovereign fund? You could have put any amount of millions in your sovereign fund. And you do realize that is a transformational opportunity we just missed. Well, I say we just missed, that was squandered. Who is benefiting from this? St. Lucia has not. St. Lucia is not. Who has benefited from that? Clearly Galaxy is. But whose Galaxy that St. Lucia should be so generous to them, so overly generous to them, that our minister of... Now, Andre, you know the guy's name? Dr. Ernest Hille. That's no fool we're talking about here. Okay? I refuse to think that we have any idiot sitting in parliament or in cabinet that would enter into such an agreement, and that there isn't a perfectly logical explanation for this situation.
Especially that phrase,
the quid pro quo.
That.
Andre, I'm saying to you, that cannot just go down so. I am saying now, we the people of St. Lucia must demand our 4 billion EC dollars. We must demand it. And that is just on one program. I'm not even talking about the other program, the real estate program. I'm not even talking about that.
Let me ask you, civil society, okay, including the chamber, etc., etc., are they interested in this?
They have shown no interest in it, and that is sad. These are people who have a responsibility in this country to take a stand and to speak out when things are so blatantly off the chart in terms of, being, what should I say? This is corruption, Andre. Corruption by any means, by any terms you want to look at it, this is corruption. That cannot be explained. And when you have the Bar Association, Andre, you have the Chamber of Commerce, Small Business Association, media workers, because I don't know you all have an association of media workers, trade unions in this country, the churches in this country, we all have to take a stand on this. Well, to its credit, the opposition is already taking a stand. We, civil society, we, ordinary St. Lucians, must take a stand on this. Because that is a life-changing, transformational situation that could have redounded to the great benefit of this country that has been squandered. We have to go to the bottom of it, and if it is not reversible, whoever is responsible must be made to pay, so that tomorrow we do not have another St. Lucian thinking that they can take us for a ride in that manner anymore.
Will you be taking calls this morning?
Yes, we will. Okay. Yes, I think we're going to open the line, Andre.
Okay.
And I just want St. Lucians to appreciate the gravity of this situation, to understand what has gone down there, and to realize that this is corruption on a scale, on a magnitude that has been unprecedented, never seen in this country in St. Lucia. And if I didn't have documents as evidence, I would not even repeat that if someone had said that to me, And that is the problem.
Okay, let me just give the numbers.
Go ahead, Andre.
The fixed line is 572-9710. Fixed line 572-9710. Or you can WhatsApp 287-0971. WhatsApp is 287-0971. And Mr. Montut, you have a call.
Yes, good morning.
Hello.
Welcome to Meet the Opposition. Go ahead and make your contribution, please.
Yes. Good morning, Spider. and Good morning to Andre.
Morning.
You, Andre.
Hi.
Good morning.
Yes.
Morning.
Spider and Andre, you know what perturbs me more than any of the points that you have made? And that doesn't mean that any of the points you have made are less egregious than the other. I mean, this is just a total catastrophe. But Spider, based on the response from Caribbean Galaxy to the CIP chairman, Caribbean Galaxy is saying clear to them that, hey, look, guys, if you try to change these things, we have a contract.
That's right.
And normally, when contracts are not complied with, the terms of a contract are not complied with, we go to court, right? People go to court.
That's right.
So, Spider,
and they will win, caller, because you signed it.
Absolutely. But the point is, Spider, St. Lucia received not a penny.
Now, I want you to give me one moment, caller. Let me read something to you, because you see, you will tell me, because your government has told you, that they put the people first. We're talking about the people's money there, by the way. Now, if this government truly were putting the people first, let us assume they made a bad deal, okay? They make a bad deal. But if they're putting the people first, they would be looking out for the interests of the people. Hear that. 14.14. On a separate note, the government of St. Lucia agreed pursuant to the agreement to submit a list of proposed projects and costs. They agreed to submit a list of proposed projects and costs which would be the subject of funding by Galaxy. So that is the $100 million they promised to spend, right? Number 15. Unfortunately, we have had no substantive response from the government of St. Lucia. Instead, all we have had is notification of 2 limited roads let me read that again. All we have had is notification of 2 limited road projects relating to the recent cricket T20 World Cup, and although those works will be funded by Galaxy, the manner in which Galaxy was notified of these works did not comply with the terms of the agreement, nor the draft memorandum of understanding. As such, we invite the government of St. Lucia to engage with Galaxy to agree upon the infrastructure projects and their implementations so that Galaxy can fulfill its side of the agreement. So Galaxy is saying they're willing to spend $100 million in projects, but up to now, the government has not submitted a list of the proposed projects and the cost of those projects up to now. All they have done is 2 limited roads, and by the way, before you even come in here, caller, your Minister of Sports said he borrowed $80 million from the national lotteries, by the national lotteries, had the national lotteries borrow that money, so that they would spend for works for World Cup cricket. However, it was Galaxy that paid for the road that we spoke about, the 2 limited projects. So if your government really cared about you and you came first, you don't think the first thing that would happen, that even before Galaxy, the ink dry on that contract, they would have a list waiting for Galaxy? Caller, it's not something I've thought about, but if you ask me now, I've given you a long list of things that could be done for St. Lucians for $100 million, you know. So that's to show you. The interest was never about no projects or anything like that. There was another interest, and I want to know what that quid pro quo was about. Go ahead, caller. Sorry to interrupt you.
No problem. I noticed Andre has been playing, of course, the role that he has to play as, it's kind of little devil's advocate.
That's right.
He's asking for, just in case, what ifs.
Right.
I remember calling a few months ago, and I put a little pressure on Andre. I don't. He doesn't know who I am. Mm-hmm. I hope he didn't get annoyed.
No.
Because I was actually put the pressure on him, not necessarily on you personally, but on the media, and you were the representative there.
Right.
You see, what I'm perturbed about is, Andre, let's assume these guys made a bad deal, right? Human beings do that. These Chinese guys, these guys are really good. I mean, if you watch those kung fu movies we used to go and watch at Gatey and Clark's, those guys were good at making dirty deals. So they got Ernest Hiller and the CIP who were kind of too enthusiastic to do the deal, and they made them sign a deal. They caused them to sign a deal at 500% interest or 500% profit for the Chinese. We're going to borrow you $100 million, and you're going to give us $600 million minimum in passports, right? That's the deal. Now, the first part of the deal, Spider, isn't it true that there's a law when government borrows money, they have to get it approved
by Parliament?
In Parliament?
You are absolutely right, and that is according to the Finance Act of St. Lucia, caller.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
here we are, in actually getting bamboozled by the Chinese and signing this deal where they're giving the Chinese 500% interest, or profit.
Right.
There we are breaking the law to do it in the first place.
Now, Connor, you're making a valid point there, because if that was brought to Parliament, I probably wouldn't see it when I signed the deal. But if it was brought to Parliament, and the opposition is supposed to be there like watchdogs and to jump on anything, you think that would escape Alan Chasney?
Absolutely not.
Oh, okay.
Because even before that, the opposition, and not just the opposition, there were people like Martinez who was scorned by the Labour Party and their supporters.
Right.
Made St. Lucians aware of what was going on.
Right.
But the point, I'm going back to my original point, Spider. So we get sued, right? We, the people of St. Lucia, get sued. Not just the government, we.
Right.
But nous pas joindre des sous. Nous pas des sous.
Yeah.
The monies never came to us. It went to the same guys who were suing us. We did not even get the fees.
Right.
The fees went to the lawyers. There are some companies, the reason why, Spider, or part of the reason why, and I know you're very diplomatic, you don't want to say it, I'll say it. Part of the reason why the law, what do you call them?
Bar Association.
Bar Association is saying nothing, because there are lawyers who are complicit in receiving fees for them same deals. They're the ones who process these applications. There was even, Spider, to make it even juicier, there is a past Bar Association president belongs to a law firm that gets special preference for Caribbean Galaxy's transactions, their passport sales, to process them.
Right.
And the president, a past president, sits in this company. I'm not going to mention the company's name. But Spider, but worse than that, you asked a question earlier. You said, why would Ernest Hiles sign a contract for a hotel that costs $400 million? Already you're giving them 100% of the money. You're not even asking them to put a little bit of skin, as you use that term, themselves, as Alan had ensured that they did in the original deal.
Right.
By tout l'argent. Their hotel, you give them all the money. And then you give them an extra 600 million US on it. You know why, Spider? The market for the passport sales is very competitive.
Right.
Dominica was underselling. Antigua was underselling. Grenada was underselling. St. Kitts was underselling. And therefore, they gave them more passports because they have to sell the passports like Bright Bear, 2 for 5.
Right.
They have to sell it 3 for 10 like Piton, and 5 for 20 like Heineken. Right?
Yes,
They were selling it go low. Right. They were selling the passports go low because you could go online. When Andre asked, do they advertise it? Oh, yes, they do. You can see the part. It says $75,000 for the next 5 days. They were discounting it and selling it as if it was not worth anything. It's all about the money. And Andre, you know what? When the agent discounts the passport, we get less money, right? But the agent gets the same commission.
Right.
The lawyer gets the same fee. But the other thing, Andre, is discounting the passports is against the law. The price is statutory based. That means there is a legal price. It's in the statutory, it's in the legislation. You cannot play with the price. Ernest Hilaire knew about the discounting of the passports. Because you know why? In June of last year, he made an address to the nation. And maybe you all will remember that. I think the 18th or 19th of June. And in that address, he admitted that there were agents who were discounted. And his response was, oh, the CIP sent them memos. They issued memos. A man is breaking the law and you give him a memo. You don't suspend him. You don't cancel him. You don't fire him. This is the sort of, like laissez-faire and poor management, maladministration of the CIP that now puts us St. Lucians at risk of, one, losing our visa-free access to certain countries that we cherish. One.
Well, yes.
Two.
Yeah, go ahead.
Two, our international reputation. So whatever capital that Juju has gained for us, Ernest Hilaire has lost it. That's what he has done. We have 3,000 people, as per Ernest Hilaire, who have already applied for the passports. They've bought the passports, in other words. We have not received a penny. But now we have cancelled the program. So, qui laisse caper ces moun sa la yon yubiye? Thank you very much, Spider.
Thank you, caller. A very informed contribution, I must say. At the end of the day, the EU has done what they have to do because they feel a threat. The UK has done what they have to do because they feel a threat. The US has done what they have to do. What the other US is doing. You know what's the other US? Who's the other US? Us. What are we doing? What are we doing? We have to take a stand on this one. We cannot accept this because, like the caller itemized, one, our reputation, our image, our resources that was squandered, and all of the illegalities and the fact that we put in our travel privileges in jeopardy, and even our international financial transactions can be jeopardized by all of what is going on there. Do you have a caller?
Certainly do.
Good morning, caller. Welcome to Meet the Opposition. Go ahead. Please make a contribution.
Hi, Spider. Good morning. Andre, good morning.
Morning.
Andre, Spider, rather, we've had lots of what I call red flags in these transactions that really should have drawn people's attention to a lot of these misdemeanors that we see that's occurring. One of the key ones is the whole concept of the governance of the CIP. Because typically, if one looks at a corporation, you would hardly find the board of a corporation being involved in the everyday operations of that corporation. You usually have a chief executive officer, and this is overseen by the board. Now, in the case of the CIP, the chief executive officer is, what's his name, McLeod, whatever, right? So typically, he is the one in charge of the operations. But what we have here is that the minister his fingerprints are all over the operations. He's right involved. He's signing off contracts. He's traveling to the Far East. All those things that you find that the CEO should be doing, he's doing. So the governance in itself is questionable. The Attorney General should be signing off on every single contract that the government signs off on. And on something of that magnitude, I doubt very much he would have had the knowledge or the experience to deal with it. So it should have been incumbent upon him to get professional assistance. This is one term that expense line in the budget. Consultant fees would have been justified. He could not cope with that. So he's got to take blame in that. You have already mentioned the Finance Administrative Act. And you can remember the origin of the change to the Finance Administrative Act when years ago the same Labour Party government borrowed money illegally from a Trinidad bank to fund the Rochamel-Frenwell affair, and it only became evident when the bank in Trinidad called on those companies to pay. And to compound it, if I recall, they tried to hide the payment within a whole mass of other payments. To make it look like a normal transaction, right? Now, even more from a government perspective is the reporting requirements, which is another red flag, because we have never got the financial statements or the minister's report or the chairman's report on time. Now, typically, when you have these situations, it means that people have something to hide, and they're hoping these timing differences will solve the problem. No. Somebody on the outside is going to say, but what's so important about the times when these statements are filed? As long as they filed. But look at it in the context of, say, the way the stock exchange operates. Companies are required, I'm talking about the stock exchanges like the New York Stock Exchange, the London Stock Exchange, etc. Companies are required to put off earnings forecasts by a certain point in time, and then when the period is gone, the actual results are compared with the earnings, with the forecast. And if you find there's a great disparity, especially when it's a negative disparity, it impacts on the share prices of those companies. So in the sense of reporting, it is extremely important that people stick to the time, because people can make decisions based on what's happening. A classical case is with all these the tariff situations going on in the U.S. now. When Trump came up with all these crazy stuff, it fed into the stock exchange. People took into consideration the uncertainty involved, and instantly the share prices in a lot of these companies fell dramatically. And even their forecasts had to be redone to take this into consideration. So we have to stop putting this thing aside and understand the importance of those things. All of this now is a giant red flag. And by a red flag, Andre, what I mean is, think of it in the context of a beach. When you have the red flag flying high in the sky, 10 out of 10 times it means there's a shark out there, or there are undercurrents. They are warning the swimmers to get out of the water. Here we have a red flag, and we do have somebody, hopefully, above the Minister for the CIP, who is the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Now, if we have a proper governance structure within government, his role now is to call in the Minister of CIP and say, look, explain this to me. And friends and party affiliations should go out of the door. You need to get a proper explanation, because remember, he is the one who is claiming to be acting on behalf of the people. And if he doesn't deal with it properly, we have this $1.5 billion potential liability line out there. So his job now is to call Hilaire in and tell Minister, explain this to me. And I'm going to tell you, and I'm sure, Spider, you will agree with me, with Compton sitting at the top of that government, the way he ran government, no minister would walk out of his office the way he walked in. And this is our problem we have there. We have, instead of having a government, we have a bunch of friends some would call it a cult. And we now have the situation, we are in a very, very awkward situation of dealing with this thing. The $4 billion you speak of from this Galaxy payment, do you know that if we were to allocate, and this is a theoretical thing, allocate this money between all the citizens, each person would get a $22,000 cash payment instantly? If we even give them $11,000, half of it, you could easily give each person $11,000, and the rest could go into the so-called sovereign wealth fund.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it's time people actually take the time. I appreciate that some of the people who have to make the decisions are influencers. They're at work and they probably aren't listening to us. Mm-hmm. But they really have to take the time to analyze the situation and see the very, very bad situation we're in. And in the face of no action by the government, these guys should not even wait for elections. They really, really got to just take their package and leave and go, because it's going to get worse, because what we're going to have now is the cover-up. And as we all know, the cover-up sometimes is worse than the crime.
Yeah.
So it's going to keep on piling up all the time. And I don't see anything good coming out of all of this. Thank you, Andre.
Okay, thank you.
Caller,
You're welcome.
A very pertinent contribution. And, you talk about Sir John and so on. Credit to Alan Chastney as well. Alan Chastney has fired cabinet members for things that are nothing close to what we're talking about here, And so, that is the kind of leader you need to ensure that these kinds of situations do not take root. Now, Philip J. Pierre will have to examine his cabinet himself, first of all, and his cabinet. And when you have an individual in your cabinet like Dr. Ernest Hilaire, who it appears that, those kinds of controversies seem to follow him, you have to ask yourself a question. This hair cannot be waved away. This hair cannot, be shoved under the carpet. That has to be dealt with, and we, the people of St. Lucia, must take a stand on this. If we don't, it means we will settle for any and everything, and I cannot accept that we as a people are not going to ensure that we make this situation right by taking a stand on it.
We have another call.
Yes. Good morning, caller. Welcome to Media Opposition. Please go ahead and make your contribution.
Good morning, Spider. Good morning, Andre.
Morning, sir.
All right. Spider, what I would like you to do, because people keep saying that the past administration never really tabled out the annual report that was required. The same way that you were explaining these letters, then maybe you might want to do that. Give us a breakdown year by year, each time those reports were tabled out.
I remember once giving the website the information on the website, but I will oblige.
I did that. I actually went on the website and I checked my message. But a lot of people, they don't have the time. They don't make the time.
And that's what the Labour Party does. So they come with the smoke screens to try to deflect from the real issue. But as you know, I'll take your advice. I will ensure that I come with the information next time.
Yeah, give us a breakdown and show compared to what they just said they submitted, compared to what you all had, and you could see the big difference. And when it, you know what I mean. All right?
Yeah, sure.
I'd really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, caller.
Yes.
Okay, I think we have time for maybe one more call.
Okay. Do we have a caller on that?
Yes, we do.
Yes. Welcome to Media Opposition. Caller, go ahead and make a contribution. Yes, good morning.
Hello, Mr. Montuton, Mr. Paul, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, sir. I just want to share my little contribution to your topic this morning as it pertains to the CIP program in St. Lucia.
Right ahead.
One of the things that I must bring to St. Lucia's attention is that during that time that the SLP was in opposition, I remember every single time they had a cabinet meeting, Mr. Hilaire was only concerned about the CIP program. And I think today we as St. Lucians can see why he was so concerned about that, because he had a specific plan for the CIP program by way of putting us in the trouble that we are in today, because the man is doing everything to affect our people and the country, and our people in St. Lucia are closing their eyes, pretending like they don't understand what is happening. Because think of it like this, Mr. Montout and Mr. Paul. Which country in this world is going to accept that they're trying to protect their country by not allowing certain people to come to their country, and they give you the privilege for you to come to their country, but you will turn around and go and facilitate for these people to be able to come to their country via your passport. That could never work, Mr. Montut, and I do not understand why our St. Lucian people are not able to see that this is a very bad idea, And I must also tell you, when I first heard about the CIB program, I was of the assumption that this was only meant for people who had a lot of money, who wanted to come to St. Lucia to invest money in St. Lucia, not to just sell our passport for a few $100,000 to any and everybody who wants to come. If you have people who have a lot of money who wants to come and invest in St. Lucia, that way I think it was appropriate to give them a St. Lucian passport. But why give everybody, who wants to come, who just have a few $1,000s, you give them our passport, and now it looks like our CIB program is almost about half of our population in St. Lucia. That is a very bad idea, Mr. Montut, and I'm hoping that something will be done about this so that we can put a stop to this.
Okay.
Because that is not a good thing for our country.
Before you go, we cannot hope something will be done. We must do something about it. And I want to see St. Lucians take a stand. I want you to take a stand with the rest of us in St. Lucia for us to do something about it. Caller B, if the Prime Minister does not speak up, if Dr. Ernest Healer does not come forward and give us a plausible explanation, or he doesn't step down as minister, and the Prime Minister cannot give us a satisfactory response to what is going on here, we, the people of St. Lucia, by June, should take to the streets and ensure that we let the government know in no uncertain terms that this is unacceptable and that we will not tolerate it.
Mr. Montut, I am very much in agreement with you. The only issue with me is that I am outside of St. Lucia, but one thing I can promise you that I have already done, I have already gotten my St. Lucia ID renewed to make sure that any time that they call the election, and also I have also get my own children to go to St. Lucia and get their IDs prepared so that anytime that election is called, we will be traveling to St. Lucia to come down there and help St. Lucians to get rid of these people because they have created enough problems for us and we are not appreciative of what they are doing. So I am 100% in support of you, my brother. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Bravo, caller. That's the way to go. And Andre did indicate that we run out of time,
yes,
and so you were our last caller. Let me say thanks to all of you who listened in this morning. Those of you especially who called, whether you're in St. Lucia or in the diaspora, we appreciate you tuning in. I just want to say that here in St. Lucia, we have a lot of crises that are taking place here, created by our government, that we have to take a stand on. Chief among them is this CIP mess that this country is in, and the exorbitant amount of money that is being swindled that we cannot get an account for. We have to take a stand for that. We have to take a stand against GPH. We have to take a stand against that $80 million that has not been explained to us, the NLA money. What is happening with the halls of justice? That 2.5% that has been slapped on us by the government, and they said it would be temporary, and they have extended it even further. We have to take a stand on all of those things. The gas prices, the extortion that is taking place with gas prices, we have to take a stand on that. Enough is enough. What the government is doing is overboard. Especially on this CIP situation, we must let the government know who is in charge. Let us show the power of the people. Thank you, and join us again next week when we meet with you again for Meet the Opposition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Montut, and thank you to all the callers. This has been Meet the Opposition. Today, Thursday, the 8th of May. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, we will be having Meet the Minister. And thank you, Mr. Montut. Have yourself a nice day.